Yeah, so just a quick,
On the downtown charrette.
we'll try to be as quick as possible. What we can do is if there's not time for comments, we can email this to you and you guys can email us comments about it. So I'm not gonna go over the comprehensive plan because you guys know what that is, but we are having some limited geographic sections for the comp plan, and one of those is gonna be for downtown. And so we organized a charrette that included design professionals, stakeholders, and residents. We organized it along with AIA Baltimore, and we hosted about 75 participants in a afternoon and evening session on January 12th. The material produced during that time was put up for the evening session where the public was invited to provide comments on what was created throughout the day. To start off that charrette, we asked Claudia to present about kind of the state of downtown and where it is now. And so she shared some great information that I'm going to skip through now because we don't have much time. But it was really great to give us context about what is going on downtown. And so here's kind of the highlights. There's $6.5 billion in investment between 2018 and 2028. We're the 13th largest downtown residential population, etc. Additionally, there was this really useful map that identified the pain points downtown. So where are there issues? Where do we see the need for more investment? And this highlights all of those. Some big ones are the Convention Center, 1 West Baltimore, that's the site of the former Mechanic Theater, 325 West Baltimore, as well as the courthouses and the police headquarters. And then also, she went over the State Center offices that are all moving from State Center into downtown in various locations. And then the support that Downtown Partnership is getting from the state, both in previous years and in current and future years. And then kind of just the state of downtown. Okay, so the theme of the charrette was to connect our assets. And it was, the starting point for that was the 2021 ULI Advisory Services Panel for Downtown Baltimore. And I'm gonna pass it to Ren.
Yeah, and as many of you know, there's a ton of ideas about downtown and a lot of really good advice out there already. So we asked panelists to start from the ULI findings that were posted in 2020, and that report is available online. If anybody's interested, you can read through it yourself. But the idea was really to connect the assets that we already have. So we asked our participants to start from that as a main theme of the event and structure all of their comments within this bigger goal of highlighting, promoting, and strengthening the assets through connection. We picked 6 geographic areas based on the pain points map and some of the prior research and just knowledge of downtown. We asked teams to work on those 6 geographies and think about the space between them as well. And then we had that working session from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then after that, the public gallery. Groups recorded suggestions and recommendations and reported those out. And then we asked people to pin up afterwards. So Caitlin and I worked very hard to organize multidisciplinary groups. It wasn't just a free-for-all. We looked at, are you a traffic engineer? Are you an architect? Are you a neighborhood stakeholder or community leader? So we structured the groups to have many different disciplines within the groups. We also considered geography that folks were familiar with. So if you were from a certain side of downtown, we put you in that side because you were the local context expert. Groups conducted a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis or a SWOT analysis, defined goals, and provided design and policy recommendations. And then we had this great pin-up session. Each team presented for 3 minutes. We kept time. It was this great sort of dump of information. And teams shared their big ideas and then also any sort of policy decisions. Following the charrette, we have some next steps. We're currently working on scanning and recording and digesting all of this great information. There was an enormous amount of work that was produced. We're going to make that available to folks so that they can see what the group said and what was drawn or written. We're also recording public comments from the gallery open house. So people came in and they voted with stickers. They said, I like this idea. I think this is not right for this time or for this geography. So we heard a lot of really good feedback following that charrette production of material. And then we're also starting this process of drawing and analyzing. So geography 1 was Market Street, Holocaust Memorial, and the gateway from East Baltimore. This is sort of the general geography. We pulled the boundaries out to include the space across the street. We tried not to draw the line down the center of the street to think about overlap and how does that streetscape work. I'll just kind of breeze through this. So the big theme from this group that looked at Geography 1, Gateway to East Baltimore, was access, equity, and connection. So they really thought about how to connect across to Little Italy, how to make that waterfront asset come further into the city across Pratt Street. They also looked at activation of the Holocaust Memorial Plaza. Right now, that space is surrounded by a fence on 3 sides, and this team really thought about how do we invite people in. They wanted to break down edges, strengthen connections across the corridors, improve the streetscape and tree canopy, and enliven the street with uses that continue after 5. So the direct quote was, how do we make this area stay alive after 5 p.m.? Geography 2 is Preston Gardens, Orleans Street, and Government Center, so kind of the geography that we're in now. This group, I was in this group with Commissioner, and we looked at dealing with the building inventories that the city owns, so the government buildings. There was a suggestion to conduct analyses of the residential market potential, consider infrastructure changes such as removal or redesign of the JFX and Orleans Street Viaduct. There was also a big idea about creating a new park between downtown and Old Town. We put on our CIP hats, and we know that creation of a new park might not be in the near future, but are there other ways to make downtown feel closer to Old Town? So urban design suggestions from this group were to break down the edges, again, strengthen connections to Old Town, improve the streetscape and canopy, and then develop open space and surface lots. And then, again, study removal of JFX or redesign. And then group geography 3.
Okay, so this section was kind of Camden Yards to the Inner Harbor, or I-395, and the Convention Center. And the recommendations were to encourage the surface light rail for the Red Line on Pratt to activate that street and provide a positive connection to assets, encourage activated ground floor surrounding the Convention Center, celebrate the arrival to the city from 395, redesign the street section at Conway. I think overall, throughout the entire process, everybody was talking about prioritizing pedestrians, convert parking lot east of Camden Yards to a park space, and consider redevelopment options at the corner of Howard and Conway. That's the former Federal Reserve site, or the current Federal Reserve site. Additionally, look at relocating the MARC station so that you have a clear visual between the Inner Harbor and the stadium down Conway Street, and then connect the Ravens Walk to Camden Yards and Conway Street so there's a clear connection to the Inner Harbor from M&T Stadium. And some more kind of urban design solutions were to, again, street trees and traffic calming on Conway, Pratt, break down the scale of the convention center. Some of the members on this team were those who are currently working on the Inner Harbor, and so, their big plan is to extend I guess that's Camden Street from the Inner Harbor through the Convention Center, creating a pedestrian walk that connects Howard Street, and to improve pedestrian connections to South Baltimore communities. The next geography was kind of Ridgely's Delight from Camden Yards to MLK and up to the University of Maryland. And the big thing was to reactivate the area around the stadiums with a better variety of uses. So there should be street calming on some of these streets, but also maybe just enhancement of them to address vacant storefronts through a variety of alternatives, and to look at zoning, how can we utilize zoning to produce more density along Russell Street and some of that light industrial to mixed use. Additionally, utilize surface parking lots for infill development. This doesn't have to be just buildings, but an active use that can add vibrancy for both game and non-game days. Locate parking under this mixed-use development. The big one was to bury MLK at Russell Street. Promote mixed-use development across MLK and Russell. There were 2 teams who worked on this. They had kind of different ideas. And this one, instead of burying MLK, they thought, what about a giant pedestrian bridge that goes, has kind of stops at the Convention Center, new development south of Camden Yards, and over to Pigtown. Because right now, really, you can't get from, it's a very short distance geographically, but you can't get there as a pedestrian. Additionally, closing Conway north of the Orioles Park to vehicles, not a lot of traffic there, and close a portion of Washington Boulevard near Orioles Park to vehicles as well. I'll pass over to Antoine.
All right, moving on to Geography 5. This consisted of Lexington Market, Metro West, as well as Franklin Mulberry. The analysis and recommendations starting with reduce city's red tape and barriers to redevelopment, appoint a downtown czar, as well as set up vacant buildings for redevelopment and upgrade infrastructure. And with that, a subcategory of supporting and encouraging light rail realignment, enhancing light rail stops along the Howard Street corridor, and improving the streetscaping for better walkability. Also, work with social services and law enforcement to improve public safety in the area and study closing Howard Street to vehicular through traffic. And the urban design suggestions on how to get to those goals were to create a high-density residential neighborhood flanked by Lexington Street to the south and Howard Street to the east. You can see that area kind of crossed out in orange. Also utilize the Bromo Arts District to transform Howard Street and Lexington Street into an arts corridor. This could consist of pop-up shops, galleries, clubs, restaurants, and public art. Moving on to Geography 6, this consists of GFC Bank Arena, Hopkins Plaza, and Water Street. And the analysis and recommendations for this area was for Charles Street in particular between Pratt and Baltimore, building better sidewalks and rebalancing the pedestrian and cars along that road, as well as Hopkins Place, the arena and plaza. They create a hostile environment in terms of walkability where there should be a strong connection there. And reconsidering the Kaiser Permanente building, which is in between those two assets, is one way to address that. Howard Street, reconsider the light rail alignment, plan for upcoming light rail improvements to reduce physical and visual barriers. And for Pratt Street, the red line will introduce the opportunity to re-envision the pedestrian realm there. And urban design suggestions for that area introduce a road diet on Redwood Street to enhance the connection between Hopkins Plaza, Light Street, and Inner Harbor. Also, a future development of the Mechanic Theater, create a setback on the Redwood site to promote a visual connection to the Hopkins Plaza and CFG Bank Arena. Enhance connection between CFG Arena and Hopkins Plaza along the two-story building on the mid-block, and update Hopkins Plaza to make universally accessible to everyone.
Yeah, so then using all those recommendations that we received from the various groups, we had these 4 goals that kind of emerged and that we're hoping to utilize in this downtown portion of the comp plan. And they have a lot of crossover, but we think they have distinct ideas. So the first one is the main idea, which is that we need to create an exciting and welcoming downtown experience. And then the ways to do that are to promote the redevelopment of vacant and underutilized properties, connect the assets, and connect downtown to its adjacent neighborhoods. So some of the urban design themes are traffic calming and pedestrian comfort, increased tree canopy, connection of assets, the transit experience for lines, stations, and integration, and making streets inviting and livelier for longer. So we have a bunch of different maps now. So this is just a quick asset map of the area that we're considering kind of our central or downtown. It might be larger than what others consider, but I think it's a logical point to go from Penn Station to Camden Station, kind of. And so these diagrams that Ren put together help identify some of these issues. So these are all the barriers, both perceived and real, that exist. A lot of these are high traffic streets that are uncomfortable to walk on or have topographic changes. Yeah, here.
Yeah, I can talk about this. So we're in this process of drawing and digesting, taking all of this information, looking at the analyses, and seeing what fits and what makes sense. So we put together a series of diagrams with overlays. So this diagram looks at transit paths. So these are protected infrastructure, what we call people paths, places where people push strollers or ride scooters, things like that, along with existing light rail and potential future red line options is the red version. So because that's undecided, that's why you see several lines. And then overlaid this with surface parking lots that were recommended for future development through that charrette experience. This map looks at recommended road diets along with recommendations for increasing tree canopy, along with some of the parks that were highlighted in that charrette. So looking at how people are getting to places, what things are currently acting as barriers and could be improved from a pedestrian experience. Then we looked at shopping streets. So you've got major shopping streets along Howard and Pratt, and then you've got some secondary shopping streets. We've called out Baltimore, Fayette, Charles Street. I think this is really interesting where you start to see how there's a huge gap between South Charles and downtown portions of Charles. And then Light Street was also called out. And then just we wanted to also include the shopping streets that are in Harbor East because we think it's really, really interesting to look at this diagrammatically and see how close those feel. So Alisana and Fleet are just a few steps away from downtown really when you're looking at it in the grand scheme of things. And then we also added the parks to this map along with major attractions, things that have peak demand that really impact traffic. So theaters, stadiums, things that draw thousands or more people to the area. And then we also wanted to think about hidden gems and cute small streets. I think cute small streets is an official term here. But, you know, what are the places in Baltimore that are really, really close to our hearts, that make it memorable, that really lend themselves to this notion of us being Charm City? So finding where those are, how do we preserve them, how to make sure that they're active and safe and well lit and just charming. So we called out some of those. And then our next steps, we are currently working on research. We're looking at precedents. We're drawing. We're going to present our findings to UDAP next week, which is an interesting step for us. I think we'd love to hear whether the commission thinks that that should be kind of a regular UDAP public meeting or should it be an internal working session. And then following Planning Commission and UDAP feedback, we're going to work towards a final set of recommendations. This draft chapter is due next week, so we're kind of going to have a placeholder. Then there will be a public comment period in 2024, and I think we're going to end right on time. So final comprehensive plan must be reviewed and adopted by the Planning Commission and Baltimore City Council per the state. Questions?
Hey, thank you all very much. I had the pleasure of participating in the charrette. You all did a phenomenal job, including Commissioner Jones' presentation of the state of downtown. So it's great to see this, the synthesis of this information. It's really, really interesting considering how was broken out into 6 parts, and now you're kind of recombining it into stuff. So I think it would be really beneficial if you were to send this out to the commission so that we can really digest it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I wish you good luck in front of UDAP. I hope they treat you like they treat the majority of my clients. I should be fun. I'm sorry. Anybody here from UDAP?
No.
No,
Just us.
I mean, I think that I personally, I would leave it up to you guys whether you think it should be kind of an internal meeting or public meeting. But those are my thoughts. Other thoughts? Commission?
I also had the pleasure of attending one of the events, and I just really want to commend staff. You guys did a really great job, and it's great to see how the data is all coming together. So, thank you.
Commissioner?
I was curious when you were showing the overlay maps and the desire that was mentioned for maybe more parks and so on. Have we thought about creating almost an interconnecting walkway that has a lot of plantings of trees, pathways that encourage people to go from one section to another?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we want to do is map out routes that people can take. We keep saying connecting our assets, but how do people, like, if you're going from the Inner Harbor to the arena for, say, Disney on Ice, how do you walk there? How do you walk there comfortably, and how is it a visually appealing space? And how do you know that that's the route you should take? How do you get from Lexington Market to Government Center, right? If we want people to go there for lunch, what's that attractive route that you're taking? So I think what our idea is to kind of have the various scenarios and think about what those walking routes are and how we can prioritize their that streetscape and work with Downtown Partnership. So they have this, they receive some money for cleaning and greening, and they're doing an amazing job with it. And I think they're already well on their way to working towards that goal. And so we're kind of just going to join them and help codify what is already kind of happening.
Yeah, because I thought it was Downtown Partnership that had looked at developing more green areas just based on some areas that may not be as attractive to people to be there, or just give a different
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that they're-
environment to want to be there.
Yeah, one of the things they're working on is the
Excuse me.
Liberty Dog Park, which is not much of a dog park at the moment. And I think, it's surrounded by streets on all sides, and the idea that Downtown Partnership is working with is how do we close some of those streets? How do we make this a space that the arena can spill out into? And how does it connect, the Liberty Lexington kind of corridor to the arena? So yeah, definitely working closely with Downtown Partnership.
Commissioner McCoach?
So I'll just speak without the mic. It was nice to come out that evening and see the work that had been done. I've missed you all, but I was impressed by the comprehensiveness of the approach. It's something that's been, this has been a missing piece of the planning puzzle for a long, long time. So thank you for taking the initiative, department, and doing that. Since the whole effort was conceived as a sort of a transparent and public approach using Downtown Partnership and the AIA, it would seem to make sense that UDAP would be as well. But I would suggest you frame the UDARM discussion as a work session. You've got fantastic analysis here. Everything is on paper, mapped, you can visualize it, you can understand it. But it's the conclusions that you should be sort of challenging UDAP to help you build and to be as specific as possible. The city doesn't need, good feelings and broad, general, sort of positive thoughts. We need direction, and I think that will inform all the other things that the agencies do. So.
Commissioner Allen, did you?
First, excellent presentation that is clearly based on excellent work. A lot of work goes into those charrettes and pulling together the data, so I can appreciate all that you've done, so thank you. I had, I think, two questions. One is just a clarification for me, because I think I got stuck on the verbiage. This is not a criticism, this is me. Bury MLK. So what were you describing by that? Because I pictured, like in Washington, D.C., where some of the roads go down and other roads are above them.
Yeah, so for that specific geography within the charrette, we had two groups, and one of the groups suggested Barry MLK, and one of them said, let's have a pedestrian bridge that goes over all of it. So I think they're both trying to address this idea that we need a connection, that MLK and, because it is higher at that point, really separates. And so I think they were thinking along the lines of, what we see in DC. I don't know if that's one of the recommendations that will ultimately make it into what we think should be, as a department and as a city, I think is appropriate. But what's kind of great is like the big ideas that came out of it that I think are really pushing the overall thoughts. But yeah, I believe that's what they were thinking about.
Okay. And I really appreciate not just the work that you all have done, but the input that all the participants did, because I was realizing as you were talking and as I was looking at the visuals that even as a planner, and our training is, and our tendency is to think empathetically, I think, about other people. But I realized I have traversed a lot of those routes that you all pointed out, walking and driving. Don't do scooters yet. Don't think I will, but... And almost by rote, because I've lived here since I was 4. That's a long, long, long time. And it just occurred to me, people do need direction, because not everybody has been here, or even those that have been here a while or are just arriving need direction to know, and the connections are not clear. They're clear to me because I've been here. And I've figured them out. But even the ones that I know are not easy. It's just occurring to me, or maybe reoccurring. So thank you. I really appreciate all the work. Sorry it took so long to say that, but
Commissioner John?
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to work with y'all on this project. Taking just a quick step back question, in these types of plans, whether it's downtown or other neighborhoods around the city, how much of the CIP process and the capital funds go into and are bound by some of the plans that come out? So the relationship between these types of plans and neighborhoods and the CIP process, how much do they go together?
I'd probably defer to Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
She deferred to you, but, while you're finishing up, let me just, it's the same thing that we would tell every, community that comes in for a community-based master plan. It's like, this is really great. Ideally, in this particular instance, since it is a city-driven, that this will inform all of the agencies to say, okay, here's our transportation, here's our public works, here's our, each BCRP. All the agencies will say, okay, yeah, I can hop on board with that, which then become CIP elements. But there's no guarantee of it. I think, from my perspective, but.
Yeah, no, I'd second that. We have two types of plans, a city plan and a community plan. The community plan specifically does not make CIP commitments. So there's an implication that the city plan might make CIP. To make that happen, we would have to go to the agencies at the beginning of the CIP process and ask that they prioritize one of these projects within their capital budget application. And then the funds would have to be available once we go through the entire budgeting process. So it'd be a 2 or 3 step process.
And it wouldn't just be for
Wouldn't be
downtown.
guaranteed.
It would be for the entire city, because the overall, our Baltimore covers the entire city, and ideally, there's gonna be recommendations for CIP that would result in CIP improvements throughout the entire city, so.
A comment on that, though. Wouldn't the application also be if you have a subject property somewhere adjacent to or next to or within an area of study, then there could be development or infrastructure considerations that this would have identified that would help guide the change? I sort of think of this as a guiding document to help sort of inform strategic decisions.
I think that's fair. I think an example I would use is Preston Gardens. If that was identified as a key leverage point, let's use that term, for a downtown project, then ultimately it might be requested of the sponsoring agency and get into the CIP. So I think that's very logical.
I would add that, in my opinion, we're embarking on a new frontier for our master planning process, which is this land use plan. And the goal of the land use plan is to help inform decisions on future land use. And it'll help inform, rezoning petitions and a variety of things. I don't know whether or not we can get down to that granular level in downtown. But ideally, if there are key elements of the plan that are informing, hey, you know what, if this comes up for a redevelopment opportunity, here are the things that we should be considering, and so on and so forth. So ideally, the plan does inform specific land use recommendations throughout the city, including downtown. My 2 cents.
Could I ask, were any specific placemaking projects, locations identified?
Yeah, there was, I would think that there was actually quite a few, especially at the gateways. Like, people really said they wanted some kind of big piece of sculpture or artwork or something that's going to announce, kind of a welcome to downtown, welcome to Baltimore. I think there were many kind of smaller scale ones. I don't know if you guys want to speak to any of this.
Yeah, there were some recommendations that were really fun, such as like public art that in the form of sculptures that people could, use as a spot to sit or kids to climb on or things like that. I think, I don't know that anybody identified a precedent placemaking that is currently happening here. We didn't ask that specific question, but as we're really sifting through the drawings, because I think now is when we're going to start to put pencil to paper for real. We've done this kind of information dump, so there's a lot of suggestions and a lot of information in the chapter, and we're now in this editing phase, which is why we're coming before you now to ask for feedback and input so that we can really direct how that chapter gets written and what our final recommendations are. But we may find more information as we're digesting this a little bit more.
I think there was some very specific placemaking recommendations around the convention center. I mean, it was very, very specific and some good big ideas
Yep.
that were generated in that particular area. I mean, Vice Chair Stevenson, we have Commissioner Horn.
Just a quick comment. Great work. In terms of the charrette, how many people showed up in terms of that amount? I don't know.
We think we had around 75 actual people who showed up. We invited, so we had our list first of like who needs to be there from like the city and various, people from the stadium authority, like those kinds of stakeholders. And then we also worked with AIA, so they put out kind of a call to their membership. And then we also included community residents. So there was, I think when we did our initial email out requesting people to come, it was the stakeholders and residents. And then that was like a limited, like half the participants. And then the other was everyone from AIA Baltimore, which partnered with ASLA and NOMA to get the word out.
So you were happy sort of with the diversity of voices in the room?
Yeah, it was a pretty good cross-section.
Good.
Can I just, we were given a limit by AIA because of capacity of 55, and we talked them into 75 by letting us spill out into the hallway. And then that 75 was kind of the base working session, and then we invited the public in for kind of an open house afterwards. I think we had 25 or so people from the public come and give additional input as part of that. So I would say probably 100 people total
Interacted.
The
interacted.
majority
with
of the
it.
75 were design, planner, architect, on the design side of the equation.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely.
And the weather turned bad for the public session at night. It really.
Yeah, it was a rainy,
nasty,
pretty
yeah.
nasty evening.
Yes. If we had capacity, I would not be opposed to opening up for another public input, but we also see the comment period as being an opportunity for people to give input.
So, one final comment and suggestion. The one thing, and I know I'm stepping into a minefield when I say this, but the one thing that was somewhat apparent is the Harbor Place discussion in the midst of, in the center of, this area. I look forward to seeing how you guys weave that into your recommendations. I'm not looking for any specific
Okay.
answer.
Say that we're going to kind of, so the goal is that they'll come to Planning Commission for a master plan review.
Yeah.
And so that is likely going to happen before this goes for comments. And so anything that comes out of that will be what's kind of subsumed within the comp plan.
And alternatively, I mean, I'm sure you're in conversation with them regularly. If there's things that you learned of during the charrette that you say, hey, wait a second, this can inform that plan, there should be that exchange of information as much as possible. The second thing would be, I think I agree with Commissioner McCoach that, approach the UDAP conversation as a work session, and maybe you hold off on sending us this until, that's next Thursday, until you go through that, and if you can synthesize, okay, here's what we also got from UDAP, so that we are like completely informed, that would be probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Great
Cool.
suggestion. Thank you.